How do you give feedback that lands and sticks and gets the results you want? Today, we'll talk about those 5 elements that really make feedback effective.
Welcome to the last mid-season compilation episode. If one of your New Year's resolutions was to make more money this year, then stay tuned because after Chris and I share some tips on how to give effective feedback, we will offer also strategies on how you can negotiate a raise. And in case you give feedback to someone and they become defensive, angry, or emotional, don't worry, we got you covered with some tips on how to prepare for these situations in the last segment of this compilation episode. And that's it for me today. We hope you enjoyed this episode and tune in next week when Chris and I discuss and even roleplay how to deal with a peer who is stealing credit for your work.
Welcome back to the art and science of difficult conversations, where we believe when we communicate better, we live better. As always, I'm Chris. I'm here. I'm one of your hosts, and I'm always as joined by Lucy. Lucy, how are you today?
I am pretty good, Chris. Thank you. I want to live better.
You want to live better.
So that's why we are here.
It's all we do here is trying to live better, communicate better.
Absolutely. How are you doing today?
So far, so good. I've been thinking about this for the past week, and um, I think our podcast name is really good and descriptive. I do sometimes wish it was shorter.
Yeah, I hear you.
I wish it was shorter and there was like a catchy acronym we can use for it,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't
So,
think that there's a better one yet.
so if any of you has ideas, let us know.
Here's a tidbit for everybody. If you've never heard us tell this before, but the Art and Science of Difficult Conversations title was really just a placeholder at first. And we said, that sounds like an okay name, but we'll keep it there for now so we can keep building stuff and recording, and then we'll think of a better name later. Spoiler alert, we never thought of a better name. We just kept using it. So here we are.
So we might change it in the future, and you could have input in it. Maybe you could do
Something
a
to consider.
competition.
Yeah, something to consider. So today we are going to talk about something that I don't think there's a number on the limit of articles and books and discussions that people have had about this topic. And we're going to add our hat into the ring of having a podcast episode about it. But I've listened to lots of episodes about it. I've gone to trainings on how
Mm.
to do this. And it seems to be definitely an art and a science to this as well. But how do you give feedback that gets the results you want out of giving that feedback? Now, Lucy and I have been either giving feedback or we've been coaching others to give feedback for quite a while. And so we've come up with, as we've kind of brainstormed and thought about this, we've come up with these 5 really important keys that every bit of feedback you give needs to have in order to have an impact. And so, could you miss one of these things? Yeah, you could still have an effect. We're just saying that these are the 5 that if you have them together, you're going to really increase the probability of success with your feedback. Is that fair to say, Lucy?
I think so. And I would say if you don't have the time, if you're overwhelmed and busy like everybody else nowadays, and you don't have the time right now or the bandwidth to read the books, listen to our episode because if you follow at least these 5 steps, it really increases the chances that your communication will be better, will be more effective, will be received better, and you will have more enjoyable moments in your work and in your
Oh,
life
yeah.
as a result. Who wouldn't want
Now,
that?
I want to be clear, set the framework first, or the context. When we are talking about feedback in this context, we are talking about as if you are a manager giving feedback to your employee. I will say this, that this approach can work with any kind of situation. You could use it giving feedback up or sideways or
Yeah.
anybody. You just have to modify it a little bit, but the framework and the basic structure is still there. So let's jump into it. Before we really dive into it, let me tell you all 5 so you don't think that we're just kind of holding out on you. So the things you need to 5 keys to success here are: number one, you have to have a framework and a plan of how you're going to give that framework. You can't wing it. You have to know exactly what you're going to say and how you're going to say it. Secondly, you need to be concrete, be specific, and have data if necessary. Third, you want to be able to manage yourself. You got to be in a calm place if you want to get to that, be able to give that feedback. Number four, timing and location is everything. They will make a big world of difference in terms of how the feedback is received. And the fifth one, you got to add an accountability structure. Just giving somebody feedback is only half the equation. You have to have another part where have some sort of accountability follow up. So let's dive into it. Number one, have a framework and have a plan of how to give that feedback. Now, I there's so many different models out there. There's the ABC model, SBI model, countless other models. Lucy, what model are you usually typically following?
I like the SBI feedback model, which says situation, describe what is the situation, give the context for that feedback. Then behavior, what is the behavior that you're observing, which helps with us when we are not giving assumptions. We are not saying, you are this way and I need you to be different. No, this is the observable, objective behavior that's being observed. You didn't fill out the form last time or twice this time, which comes together also give the data. You need to have data, so you provide specific observable behavior. Then the next step is for I, impact. What is the impact on you? What is the impact on the project? What is the impact on the team? What is the impact on anybody else who is involved? Which again is making it more objective rather than pointing fingers, but really owning when this happens, the impact on me is I need to then stay longer at work and work for 2 extra hours. Then I'm late for my family with my kids. I don't know, it could be. Or the impact is we are delayed. We're risking being delayed with the payroll, say. And then there's the impact on everybody else because they're getting paid one day later, which for some people can make a big difference.
Mm-hmm.
They could be upset, let's say, providing that type of feedback. What really is the impact? Which the impact on that when we provide feedback from this way, when we are saying this is the impact on me, this is the impact on the team, we are not blaming. It doesn't seem more as a blame. It's really sharing what is from our perspective. This is the
Mm-hmm.
impact. And then usually to follow that, what's coming up for you when you hear this? Is that also from your end, how this is showing up? Or so have a question, ask for more details, their perspective, or have a request. You know, this there is a standard. We need to meet that standard. How can we partner together? What can we do together to get there? Something needs to change. What can we do together to change that? And then from that, collaborate. Mm. Be your
Yeah.
approach that you're using.
Well, I was just thinking as you were sharing that, I've seen that model so many times, and they call it the SBI model, but really it's the SBICRC model. Like, there's lots more things that happen after you talk about the impact.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, the thing I use, I don't actually even have a name for it. I learned it in a training long ago, and it's very
Mhm.
similar to SBI. It's just 3 steps, but it's very straightforward. You just talk about what they did that's correct or incorrect, what the impact of that behavior is, and then what you want them to do differently in the future.
Yeah.
Just those 3 steps. And then if it's a coaching conversation or you want to have a coaching conversation, like that's meant to be like you just walk by, let me give you this 30-second feedback. I need to tell you to do this differently. But if you're having
Yeah.
a longer conversation, then after you tell them the impact of that or the consequence of that behavior, then you ask them for their input. Have you noticed that? What's coming up for you? And then you talk about what are we going to do going forward. So it's very similar. You can kind of modify it however you need to. And you know,
Exactly.
you could do it for positive feedback too. If Lucy, you just
Absolutely.
facilitated a workshop and you knocked it out of the park and you did an incredible job, I'm going to say, Lucy, in that workshop you just did, some of the activities you ran, you were able to get people who are introverted to share. You're able to get everybody's input together, and you really deliver an experience where everybody was learning, this is going to be something that's impactful for them and they're going to take back to their work. I don't need to tell you to do anything differently because you just did it. So that's it. Just keep
Yeah,
doing those
you
things.
can ask me questions.
Yeah, I can ask you questions, but
Or you don't need
but
to
yeah,
do
it works
anything. You just
for
can start with SBI and that's it. Yeah.
right. Yeah, so you can obviously just use it for positive and negative feedback, but
Yeah,
if you're listening, you can see it doesn't even matter which one you use. They're very similar. All of them are very similar. They're all kind of
absolutely.
just
Yeah.
doing their thing, right? It's really about you got to know what you need to say. And so, and then part of that leads into the second one. You got to have specific data and be specific. When you're giving feedback, if you've ever heard, I need you to be more assertive, or you need to stop being rude, right? Those kind of things we think are descriptive, but the problem is everybody interprets them differently.
It's more of a judgment rather than
It's a
description.
judgment.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. And so you might say, but I wasn't rude in that meeting. I thought I was just stating what I needed to say. I just was
Exactly.
saying my piece. So
I'm being honest.
I'm being honest. I'm not being rude. And so you need to focus on specific concrete behaviors, right? So thinking about instead of saying you were rude, saying, Lucy, in that meeting, you interrupted Tom multiple times while he was trying to answer a question, while he was trying to share. Right. That's the specific behavior that's very clear. There's
Um,
no getting around that. Right. So when you're thinking about that, Lucy, when you're thinking about being concrete and specific, what else are you thinking about?
I would say it empowers the conversation in a way that it eliminates the gray area and misunderstanding. So it helps people to really get on the same page with what happened and what is the impact of that. And without
Mm-hmm.
specific data, I know some leaders they're uncomfortable sharing the specific negative feedback, and they package it so well that the person they thought they gave hints of the behavior, but the
Mm-hmm.
other person, without having the specific tangible data, they think they're just doing fine. So the specific data can provide really also the ground for accountability in the future too.
Right. Right. And it takes that out of your personal judgment of you just don't
Absolutely.
like the way they're doing something into no, you actually are doing this,
Yeah.
right? Like, and it's easier for people to wriggle out of or minimize something if you can't prove it, right? If you say, Lucy, you've been late multiple times over the past week. Well, when was I late?
Yeah.
Just a couple of times. I think I was only late once. Like I can admit that I was late once. But if I have like specific data saying, hey, based on the clock in times, you were late last Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and yesterday, you can't wriggle out of that because I have data, and we don't even have to argue about
Exactly.
the data. We can say this is the facts. That we're not going to argue about whether it's true or not. This is what happened.
True. Yeah. So it already moves the conversation forward rather than being stuck at, oh, that is not true. Give me the data, give me the proof.
Exactly, exactly. So
Which takes extra effort or might take extra effort on the leader's side to really be organized themselves. Or maybe have a Google document with each employee and put notes and
right.
feedback there. Because all of us, we can forget what we wanted to say, or so really be also diligent with our own and keeping track record.
Yeah. Although I guess
And
now
some
that's
cases, yeah, go ahead.
well, I was going to say, as we talk about this example, now I'm thinking, why did you let this go for so long if they were late for four times?
That's true too, yes. But it can happen. So let's say if you
It
haven't
can
had
happen.
those conversations before, this is the podcast for you.
Yes, yes,
So
yes.
start tracking it. Create that, get a notebook or a Google document on your computer or some file where you can put your notes. Of
Right,
course, keep them private.
right, right, right. And I think that's also helpful to even for you as a manager to conceptualize, is this important enough for me to give this feedback?
Yes.
If I like love black pen ink, but you keep writing in blue pen ink, is it really that important that I'm writing all this
It's
down? As I'm
not.
writing it down and thinking about the impact, I'm like, actually, it doesn't really matter. It's annoying. Like I just like black pen ink better, but but it might not be that important. And so maybe you don't need to give feedback after all.
It also makes me think when we write things down, another benefit, it could be looking at the balancing positive and negative feedback
Mm, yeah.
and intentionally see
Yeah.
if you can find also things that you can give positive feedback on.
Mm, yeah. I think that's fair
Because
for sure.
just if the employee only gets the negative feedback, what could be the impact on that employee?
Yeah. This is making me think. A side note: what do you think about the feedback sandwich?
Could work in some situations. Let's say when there's positive, negative, positive. Um, it could be tricky for those leaders that are so super nice. They sandwich it
Mm,
so well
yeah.
that the person leaves away from that feeling, they're doing fine. Yeah, there were some small things, but it really doesn't matter because there's so many other things they're doing well. So I
Yep.
see the
Yep. Yep.
possible risk in that.
Yeah. I'm not a
What
fan
if,
of it.
yeah.
I heard this analogy a long time ago, and it's stuck with me ever since. That when you're eating a sandwich, you're not
Hmm.
eating a bread bologna bread sandwich. You're eating a bologna sandwich, right? It's the middle part that's really the most
Good one.
important. And
Yes,
by doing that, you risk diluting the message of what you're
exactly.
trying to send if you're too nice.
Yep.
Or if you have an employee that maybe you weren't nice, maybe you were very straightforward and did everything the way you were supposed to, but the employee just heard the good thing at the end and said, you know what, I guess
Yeah,
I'm doing pretty well. This is great.
exactly. Yeah.
Got some stuff
So
to work on, but yeah, I'm knocking it out of the park.
so that could be tricky. Yeah. So maybe
So
balancing it out, give clear positive feedback, and then find times to also for constructive feedback when necessary.
yeah, I had an employee when I she like when I first worked with her, like when we started, I asked her, what's how do you like to receive feedback? She actually requested the feedback sandwich. She's like, I actually like, positive, negative feedback, positive. And I talked to her about it. I said, listen, I'm happy to give you positive feedback with that critical feedback. That makes sense. I'm not opposed to that. I don't think this sandwich works the way you want it to. And we talked about like why she wanted it that way and all reasonable things, reasons why she wanted it that way. So I don't want to discount like her reasonings for it. So we were able to agree, let's do this positive and negative at the same time. We won't, it's never going to be all negative. It's going to be, a balance, which I agreed with. It's fine to do a balance.
Yeah.
So,
And
but having that conversation,
what I love about your approach really also getting on the same page and getting an agreement about and permission to provide the feedback and what kind of feedback works for them.
yeah,
That could be very empowering for the employees. So they already know, yeah, there's going to be feedback. And that feedback, if we create that safety, that the feedback is not you are a horrible employee and you're doomed forever, or you will never get a promotion if you make one mistake. But this feedback, this constructive feedback is my way of supporting you because I want you to be successful.
that's right. That's right. Yeah.
So really also making sure that the perception of the feedback, that we position it in a way as this is a way of support, not a punishment.
Right. And speaking of how we're packaging that feedback leads into our next point, which is managing yourself. And this is actually the reason why we're even doing this is because that last podcast recording we did, we went to a tangent a little bit about there's often a lot of people who are really nice. They don't want to give too critical feedback because they had a lot of critical managers themselves. So they don't want to repeat that. Fair. And so now they are stuck in I want to be nice, but I still need to give the feedback that gets
Yeah.
things done. And so with that, this is what you really are passionate about. What are you thinking about in terms of reframe managing ourselves and reframing how we even think about feedback?
That reframe can be really helpful looking at when somebody's value is being a kind person. I want to be kind, empathetic person towards others. And that's the leader I want to be. I really want to ask questions and listen and be kind because I don't want to be like my previous leader who was really harsh with everybody. And that's why I left the company. I had clients telling me that.
Mm,
And now they're faced with, yeah, but this employee, they are not really getting my feedback. And I feel I need to be telling them the things that I don't want to say because I still want to have a good relationship. I still want to be a nice person. I don't want to be mean. And I feel if I
Right.
am afraid, if I tell them that, it's going to be like I'm being mean to them. So we really explore what is the impact if the employee doesn't get the feedback. What are the possible consequences of that? Well, the problem never gets fixed. The leader might get additional work on their plate, especially if
Mm-hmm.
they're already overwhelmed. So it can lead
Mm-hmm.
to their even burnout down the road, possibly being resentful and additional stress because they know they should have the conversations, but they are avoiding it. So the discomfort, emotional cost on their well-being, cost on for the company, maybe increased mistakes can have impact on other departments in the company or the projects, could be financial impact,
Mm.
and also the impact on the growth of the person. Well, if they feel they or think they are doing great, there's nothing wrong, they will never be motivated, incentivized to grow or change. And so
Yeah.
is that really helping? Is that being kind to them? Really? Or
Mm.
would that really actually support them if they receive that feedback so they can change? One of my recent sessions was the person was worried if she gives the person feedback, unless something changes, he's not going to get the next contract. And she didn't want to give him the feedback. Um, and then she realized, well, if he gets the feedback, then yes, he might quit right away. And yeah, then we get somebody else. Or if he gets the feedback and then he really wants to keep that job, that gig, that project going for another contract, then it can motivate him to change. And
Mm.
all of us can benefit. And he will have the opportunity to continue having income through our company. So she realized, well, if I really want to serve him and support him, which I really want, I need to give him the feedback, even though it's uncomfortable for me.
Mm. Mm. Love that insight.
And so really reframing that
Yeah.
for ourselves. Is that being kind to them when we are keeping them in the dark in a way?
Right. Right.
Or is it
Yeah.
robbing them from the opportunity to grow?
That's a powerful reframe. I think that's absolutely right. I think we're trying to protect people from
Mm-hmm.
certain things, but really we're trying to protect ourselves,
Yeah.
right, from any potential negative reactions.
Mm-hmm. So it's about also preparing ourselves emotionally
Yeah,
for, okay, what if they get frustrated? Okay, so how do I keep myself calm while they are going through the emotions? And they have the right to feel however they are feeling.
that's
How
right.
can we reaffirm them that this is because we want to support them and have
Yeah,
that trusting relationship?
right. Right. Yeah, it's not our job to manage other people's emotions.
Exactly. And so that also the distinction, what is my responsibility? Am I responsible for their emotions or am I responsible just for my own right now and managing my own so I can stay calm, even when it's uncomfortable, so I can stay centered and really say what I need to say.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. I don't have anything to add to that. I think that makes sense.
So I think then we can go to the next point.
Yeah, timing and location is everything.
Mm,
I think obviously location, you want to give feedback in a place. I think if a lot of people are taught give praises in public, criticisms in private. I think that's fair. I think that's the kind of team dynamic you want to create is you don't want to be giving this really, you can give positive feedback in public, go for it. You want to give critical feedback or constructive feedback in private because there's a lot of emotions and you don't want to get people defensive about it. You want them to be able to listen, right?
yeah,
Unless it's very urgent that you give that specific 30-second feedback, right? Like a safety issue
yeah,
or something that's really dangerous, you need to give that feedback immediately.
right
Don't worry
away.
about everybody else. But outside of that, talk about that stuff privately so you don't have to worry about people's emotions and you won't be interrupted. And timing, we were talking about timing ahead of this because we agree timing is everything, right? So when you think about feedback, giving specific feedback, what are you thinking about in terms of how soon to give that feedback?
if something happens within the weekend, we have weekly one-on-ones, one-to-ones, I would say that could be an opportunity to provide regular feedback. What's going
Mhm.
well, what's working well, what might use some tweaks, what might need to change. So giving regular feedback in those one-to-one meetings could be beneficial. Again, if that's safety issue, as soon as possible. You
Mm.
mentioned a great
Yep.
example if somebody's giving a workshop for the full day when we're preparing for this before recording. True. If they're exhausted at the end of the day, they might not be in the right mental space to receive
Right.
a comprehensive feedback on how the workshop went.
Yeah.
So that might not be the best timing and space for that. So also really making sure that the other person is also in that right space and they do have the time, that you have the time for that feedback. It's not
Right.
like in the hallway, you give them feedback when people can pass by, but really having a private space. There was one thing, maybe you saw me making a face, because that reminded me when you were sharing, give positive feedback publicly, negative constructive feedback privately. For some people, even the positive public feedback could be triggering for them, especially if they're
Mm.
very introverted. It might create
Fair.
very uncomfortable feelings in them.
Great point. Fair point. That's fair.
So that could be to your point previously, really when you have your team, have the conversation how they like to receive feedback, even a positive feedback.
Yeah. Yeah.
I,
Absolutely.
do they love to be acknowledged in front of others? Some people, yes, please, anytime. Some people, no, really, I would love to hear the positive feedback, but let's keep it in our meetings, please. Because I
Mm.
really don't want, I feel very uncomfortable being on the spotlight.
Yeah. I think that's worth another discussion because then you risk by not even acknowledging it in public, you risk other people saying, "Well, why doesn't Lucy acknowledge Chris's good work?"
Hmm,
Like,
that's a
if
good
I'm
one
if
in the
I'm
team environment.
right, so like I think that gets into like that hard part of like team dynamics is
Yes,
yes, that makes I agree with like yeah, it makes sense. Let's
on the
let's have
personal
if
level. Yeah,
yeah, if you want to be personal, let's have it one on one. Let's talk about I'll save it for that. It becomes a little bit hard now. Like, what kind of tone are you setting for the rest of the team? And so then I would have that conversation. It's like I'd like to still acknowledge that you did this.
yes,
We don't have to dwell on it. We don't have to spend a lot of time on it. What's a good way I can do that without kind of putting you out?
fantastic. Love it. Kind of getting an
So
agreement for what works for everybody, what's motivating for
yeah,
them. And
exactly.
the
But
team.
yeah, I think there's also a risk if you don't acknowledge in public, right? Maybe not
Great
giving the
point. I
feedback, but
agree.
you should still
Yes,
acknowledge, right?
great point. Yes.
So the last thing is adding accountability structures. I think this is the one that I think a lot of people miss. And even
Mm,
if they don't want to miss it, they don't know how to do it. And so it's really thinking about it's not adding in accountability measures is really vital. Nobody disagrees with like having accountability. Everybody, there's plenty of trainings and workshops on how to increase accountability.
true.
And adding in accountability measures after the fact is very hard. It's very difficult because life gets in the way. And so, my favorite question when I ask this or when I coach anybody to do this is as soon as you've come up with a plan of what's the next step, you're going to do this, or we all agree you're going to do this next step.
Yeah,
The question I have everybody ask is, what do you want to do if it doesn't work? What do you think
I
we
like
should
that.
do if that doesn't work? Whatever
Mm,
variation of that is, it doesn't really matter. It's just you want to talk ahead of time. What happens? Right. And so
uh,
I've had a leader ask or feel hesitant of asking that because they asked, but aren't we like setting them up for failure or aren't we assuming they're going to fail at this? And the answer is no, right? The answer is you are just assuming something might get in the way. It might be they
okay.
just don't do it, which is possible. Let's talk about like what happens if you just don't do it. Maybe we have to go to HR or life gets in the way, right? Like maybe there's a lot of personal things going on that prevent you from doing this. What do you want to do? How do you want to address this? And so coming up with that collaboratively ahead of time can help you create that accountability measure. Like, okay, well, let's check in 2 weeks and see how things are going. or I don't know how this is going to work. I don't know if I can really make it. Can we check in next week to make sure I'm on track here? But talking about it right then and there while it's still fresh and you've gotten agreement on the next step, that can really
Absolutely.
solve a lot of headaches ahead of time. But
I agree.
what's your way of adding accountability structures?
I agree. Agreeing on the next steps. Um, Often it could be even so having them come up with the next steps
Mm, yep.
rather than the leader saying, I think you should do this, 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 to get a buy-in from the person, and which is increased accountability. What is what do you think could be the next steps? And having them think things through, and maybe asking them what do you think could get in the way? What would be the support for you to, or steps to prevent this getting in the way? Or when that gets in the way, what would be the steps to address that?
Mm-hmm.
And plan for, okay, scenario one, scenario two, if needed. And again, figure out, okay, when do we need the next step for us, our conversation? Where do we review?
Mm-hmm.
Could be having a structure when we meet next. I would love to know first what worked well, what do you want to celebrate. Let's celebrate
Mm-hmm.
first, start on a positive note, and then let's explore anything that got in the way. What kind of support do you need to move
Yeah.
forward?
Yeah. The ongoing follow up. I think that's key,
Yeah.
right? I think it's
Mm,
I think that's why I think project management is one of those skills that every leader needs to have to some degree.
yeah.
Obviously, you don't need a certification, but you need to know how to manage a project, which is all of this. Everything we talked about is how do you manage that project? How do you set up milestones and how do you set in regular check-ins?
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's key. I think that's a great point. Is how do you continually follow up and celebrate the successes and things that need to be course corrected along the way, right? Not just waiting for let's talk about this next year at your
Yeah.
performance review.
Exactly. Well, I gave you the feedback, so now you should know what to do.
Yeah, now you just do it, right?
Exactly.
One scenario I'm wondering, Lucy, this comes up before is a leader is in a meeting and a leader from a different team, maybe a different VP, comes up to me and says, let's say you report to me and says, "Hey, Chris, Lucy did this in a meeting. It was really messed up, or really inappropriate, whatever." So essentially implying that I need to give you feedback about something that this other VP or this other leader saw in a meeting.
Yeah.
How do you approach that, or how do you kind of navigate that?
That's a tricky one. Depending on the relationship and among, that's a good question. I would say again, looking at is this really important? Having the feedback first with the VP, seeing really understanding what happened, getting the data,
Mm-hmm.
and then using the, let's say, SBI to provide that this is the situation, this is the meeting, this is the behavior that's been observed, it's the impact.
Mm,
What can we do? What's going on? What's your perspective on that? What is your side of the story? This is what I've heard. I want to also know your side of the story, of the
mm,
situation,
yeah.
and see how can we figure this out, because we need to all work together. And what would be the next steps? Do you want to talk directly? Is there any change needed? Is the feedback does it?
That's fair. Yeah.
How would you approach this?
I I've had the leaders, or I've always told leaders, don't give that feedback
Mm-hmm.
because you weren't there. You don't know really what was happening.
Yeah.
But I think like you, I would ask that VP or that other leader, anybody, I would just
Yeah.
get more details. Like, can you describe
Mm-hmm.
more what happened?
Yeah.
If they really feel bold, they can also ask the other leader, that sounds like it was really terrible or really difficult. That's
Yeah.
tough. What did they say when you gave them that feedback? And then you're basically implying that they should have given that feedback because they saw it directly.
Mm. Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's weird to be put in that position
Difficult to
and
navigate. Yeah.
difficult to navigate. I'd say just ask like, what do you want me to do with this information? Because I wasn't there, so how could I give this feedback?
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
always find it weird. How can you give feedback that you weren't there to see? Unless it was so detailed and you like have a very clear idea of what happened.
Yeah.
But a lot of times, it's again like those. most people are giving you that secondhand knowledge of like, hey, this person was rude during that meeting, but what does that mean? And how often did it happen?
Exactly.
And how big was it? Like, or that person was unprofessional. Like I need more
A lot of feedback.
details.
Exactly.
Yeah, I
Yes.
need like details that'll help me because
Yeah.
otherwise I can't give that feedback. Even if I wanted to, even if I was like, even if I agreed this person shouldn't be unprofessional. What do they need to do differently? I have no idea what to tell them.
It can be tricky, and it depends on the relationship we have. Some people are more comfortable, and the specific details. Sometimes it is important that the person, let's say, if they were giving a workshop, and in that workshop, some things happened, and maybe the VP will never interact with them ever again. Yeah, the behavior could be concerning for the overall performance of that person.
Right. Right.
So that we gather data, and that could be part of that conversation. And of course, make sure that we gather data from them, what's happened for them from their perspective,
Right.
and not siding with anybody, but really being more of that curious, non-judgmental state. I want to know what happened. I'm here to support you. What was your
Mm,
side of the story?
yeah. Yeah. Exactly. So there we have it. We have those five big key strategies. Number one, have a framework or a plan of how to give that feedback. Number two, be concrete and have the data if necessary. Number three, manage yourself, your own expectations, your own emotions, your own frame, how you're even framing that feedback to yourself. Number four, recognize that timing and place is everything. So get the right timing, get the right place. And then five, add accountability structures. Find the way to make sure you're holding them accountable because I don't know, it's hard for people to hold themselves accountable. Like how many people create New Year's goals and don't follow through on them,
True, is one
you
of the
know?
biggest obstacles and challenges, yeah. And
Yeah,
also set the boundary possibly. If this doesn't happen, if
exactly.
this doesn't change, it could be part of
Right,
the accountability conversation, really setting the boundary, sharing the consequences.
right, exactly. So that's it. There we have it. Those five things. I think those are the keys that have always helped me when I'm giving feedback to make sure the feedback goes over well. Like Lucy mentioned before, they're not always gonna be happy with that feedback, right? But that's not the goal, right? If
No,
you are telling them all the things they've done wrong, I don't know, everybody's gonna be like, I'm super happy you told me all this. Like most people would feel some sort of way about it, even if they're like
true.
glad to get feedback and move in a positive
Yeah,
direction. Still doesn't feel great to everybody.
no,
So it's all really about how do you get the results you need? How do you move things forward and be kind and clear and compassionate by giving that feedback.
absolutely. And I would say be kind also long term rather than kind at the moment. Well,
Mm,
for now, let's just feel good for this today.
yeah,
But is
yep,
that gonna really, is that a strategically being kind, strategically long term for that person?
yep,
Is that kindness
absolutely.
really kindness?
Yeah.
So checking in with ourselves.
So there you have it. A little bit different than our regular episodes, only because we don't do a role play, because we've been giving you examples all along. But let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. Either email us or comments and let us know below. Did we miss something? Are we wrong? Do you feel like we just need to be more direct? And we talk about this all the time. Is it depends a lot on the relationship too,
True.
right?
Yes.
Some of the bosses I've had that I've been with them for 4 years or more, we get to a pretty good rhythm where they can just tell me what's up, and
Yeah.
I understand. I know what needs to happen next. We don't need to have a long sit down discussion about like what the next steps are
Yeah.
because we've already gone through that. We have a good sense of like a good flow of what happens next. But yeah, if you're still building that routine or if you're still trying to figure things out, then yeah, it might take a little bit more time for sure. But
And if you are dealing with a situation at work right now and you have some concerns about giving that feedback, let us know. Email us, message us. We can role play that scenario for you.
absolutely. Well, thanks, Lucy. As always a pleasure. Thank you for everybody listening. Please like, comment, subscribe, engage, talk, do whatever. But we hope to see you next week at next week's episode.
Thank you, Chris. And thank you, everybody, for listening. And see you next time. So let's go to your
Mhm.
question. What to do
Mhm.
when negotiating a salary? Number one, state kind of understand the situation of the company.
Hmm.
Number two, also show your accomplishments. So kind of if that's associated, combined with the, let's say, a yearly review, show your wins, what you've
Hmm.
created, what you contributed to the company, the value that you brought. Hello and welcome to our first episode of the season 2 of the Art and Science of Difficult Conversations. My name is Lucy and I have Chris here with me.
I'm here. We're
So
back.
we are back after a little holiday. It's beginning of August 2024, or any time other time that you are listening or watching us. Welcome. Now we are going to do things a little bit differently this season. We will be merging the strategy about how to have difficult conversation, what to do, what not to do, with the role play right after. We thought that might be more reasonable and actually useful to you. So you learn the strategy and then hear and see how it actually is implemented. And each of these episodes will also have about a question. So please, if you have any question in your mind, how to have this type of difficult conversations, let us know.
Lucy, are you excited that we're back?
I'm excited we are back. That's and I'm excited. It's a beginning. Beginnings are always exciting. And we are celebrating also the ending of the episode of the season 1. So
Hmm.
that was exciting, putting together all the compilation episodes, our best interviews. That was the one that I recently put together. What about you? Are you excited?
I'm excited for this new format. I'm excited to do the strategy and the role play right away so that we can put it into action so people can see that it actually works and it's not just us randomly talking into the universe.
Yeah, so we are improving slowly but surely. Who knows what season number 3 would bring?
Yeah. Oh, that'd be great. So we'll see. But so today's question actually is something I see a lot, both in Reddit forums, on LinkedIn, everywhere. People keep talking about this is how do I negotiate for a raise? How do I negotiate for a higher rate? Because there's a lot of pitfalls. There's a lot of things that you can do well, and the problem is there's a lot of ways to do it wrong. And I think people it makes the conversation more adversarial if you do it the wrong way. So why don't we start with how do you do it correctly? What's the best ways to negotiate and prepare for a negotiation to get a raise?
There was a thought that came to my mind as you were talking about this, and the difference sometimes people even are afraid to ask for the raise.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I've seen it in the past when I was working actually in HR in the past some time ago. I saw that the guys, I don't know if that was just the case for the company or could be, I could be wrong, but at least in this company, the guys were asking actually more proactively every year for a raise and they were getting it. And there were some women that had been with the company for years, but they were not asking for the raise
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
their salaries actually were lower. So that also explained the differences between the guys' compensation versus the women.
Yeah.
Sometimes women just are not asking. And when I came actually from Europe to the US, one of the first lessons I was taught by a friend, Lucy, if you don't ask, that means that they assume you're happy with what you have
Mm.
in this
Mm.
culture. So I don't know if that's from your experience, you've been longer here than me.
Yeah. I think I've seen the same research years ago. I saw the same research that there's a trend where men just traditionally are more willing to ask for more money at even at the when they get the job, that opening salary negotiation,
Yes.
they're willing to ask for more. And so I remember there was a big movement years ago for to give women the confidence and the words on how to ask, and even just that, like you said, the mindset of like I need to ask. And
Yes.
I think it was helpful in the big picture, right? Like I think there's still pockets where people don't do it well and they don't feel confident doing it. And truthfully, I don't know. Sometimes we are going to portray it as we should try to be collaborative as possible. And the truth is, sometimes the manager or HR in a company may not be willing to be collaborative. Like they're
Absolutely.
either
Yeah.
purposefully or not on purpose. They're going to be more of a roadblock. So
Yeah.
I think it's important to think about how do you navigate those roadblocks when they come up.
So that we can address in the role play. So let's go to your
Mm-hmm.
question. What to do
Mm-hmm.
when negotiating a salary? So usually when clients come and ask, Lucy, I think I really need a raise. How do I ask for it? We look at usually if it's, a yearly review, if that's the period in the company where they do the raises. So first,
Mm-hmm.
understand the company. How do they give raises? Is that the once in a year? Is that a quarterly review? Any time can happen. Number one, state kind of understand the situation of the company.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, also show your accomplishments. So kind of if that's associated, combined with the, let's say, a yearly review. Show your wins, what you've
Mm-hmm.
created, what you contributed to the company, the value that you brought. Some
Mm-hmm.
clients even create a presentation,
Mm.
a little PowerPoint.
I've
I have
never heard of
clients.
that. I've never heard of that. I love that idea, but I've never heard of it. That's cool.
I've had few clients creating PowerPoints and that got raises. So very clear and simple. Showing basically their accomplishment, what they projects that they participated in, created, changes they made. Also any requests for feedback, how to improve, and then for the future, their goals, how they want to grow with the company, and then naturally the conversation then goes into the future and also the salary conversation
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
after they share, their contributions. So I would start with that. You don't need to create a presentation, but if you keep track of all your accomplishments and wins, that can actually help. Because what happens a lot of the times, the managers even forget all the accomplishments.
Mm. Yep.
And so
Yeah.
it's your responsibility to actually bring it to that table and to conversation.
And
What's coming
I
up
would
for you?
say,
Mhm.
well, I would say like that noting down your accomplishments is so huge. It's something that managers aren't purposely forgetting everything you've done, right? Like
Yeah.
if a manager oversees just you, yes, of course they're going to remember a lot of the things you've done. If they're overseeing four, five, six, 10 of you, it's
Exactly.
a lot harder to keep track of all those things. And so it's not that they're purposely not wanting to remember or care about the things you've done. It's just hard.
Yep.
Um, so one of the things I always tell people, and I've always done, is when you finish a project or you do something really well with somebody else cross functionally, have that person email you quickly,
Nice.
like what did I do well, like what did you appreciate, and that way you have a record of it and just put it in a folder. That way, again, you can reference it at the end of the year
Mm-hmm.
if it's a performance review.
Yep.
And I had a coworker who used to write down every project she worked on and what the result was. I thought that was super smart. Like it was the first time
Oh
I'd seen
yeah.
somebody do that, and I was like, "This is great. I'm gonna start doing that."
That's fantastic. With clients, we even talk about doing their one-on-ones to start with wins. Each one-on-one or,
Mm-hmm.
a monthly, let's say, check-in, start with a win. What went well since last time?
Yep.
What am I working on? What are the challenges? What I need help with? And then, what am I going to work on next? And that way, if they keep track of it, they have all the wins throughout the year. So that
Yep.
will be easier to prepare also for that review because they don't have to go to their memory or to their emails. They would just have one document already.
Yeah, and I think earlier you said do like focusing on like the what's going on with the company and like are
Mhm.
there is it during the annual performance review?
Yes.
It is also important to think about what's the current environment. Is there a salary freeze? Is there a hiring freeze because of
Yep.
economics?
Yep.
If you're in a tech company and you're doing a bunch of layoffs, it's gonna be hard to justify that you need a
Yeah.
raise. Even if you, and we'll talk about that when we talk about the don't do these things, even if you're taking on the work of other people, it's hard to justify that at times, right?
Exactly. Especially in the economic downturns. And right now, at least this year, since last year, the tech industry is going through a lot of changes, lots of layoffs. I know just one
Mm,
company, one of the
yep.
companies I work with, they laid off about now 20,000 people since last year already
Oof.
worldwide. So, and that's just
Yeah.
one company. And so the market conditions are really changing. And so it's even harder to find jobs.
Yeah.
And a lot of companies actually have freezes, not on
Yeah,
hiring, but they don't give promotions. They have limited budgets because they want to restructure. So the situation is not easy right now for lots of companies.
absolutely. And that also makes me think you should also be doing a lot of market research. You should
Yes,
be, as part of your preparation, you should be thinking about the company, what the company, the current state of the company is, and what's your market rate. You got to know what the salary you would normally get anywhere is. And so you
ex-
can use Glassdoor, salary.com, PayScale,
yeah,
LinkedIn. I say ask people, ask other people, ask friends. I think managers tend to say don't talk about your salary, and the manager shouldn't talk about your salary with other people.
true. Yeah,
And it's perfectly legal here in the US. It's perfectly legal for you to talk about your salary with other people. And I always encourage everybody to share their salary no matter what. Like, you should be sharing your salary, and it, like, if it's upsetting for the culture, like, then that's a problem. If it's already upset, if it's like upsetting, right, that
yeah,
means it wasn't equitable to begin with. There's a
true.
Instagram account I follow. I think they're on YouTube, but salary transparency, and
Hmm,
this woman and her husband, they just go around asking people what do they do, what are their salaries, and like just being
oh,
really
nice.
transparent about what people's salaries are, what their education to get to that point, and how many years of experience they need, and
That
really just breaking down a lot of those barriers of what do people make.
Wow, that sounds like a great resource. Would you put a link into the
Yeah, we'll put.
in
That's a
our
good
show
idea.
notes?
Didn't even think about that.
That's it reminded me of really how important the research is. And even actually in California now, companies are required to also share the salary range.
Mm-hmm.
So you could even go on LinkedIn or anywhere, as you mentioned, the Glassdoor, and see if I get hired in my area, because the salary could be different in California versus somewhere in Iowa
Right,
for the
right.
same position, let's say. So look
That's
at what's the salary in your location where you live.
I think that that's a really good point. Is and this is I only know this because I did a little bit of salary benchmarking in the past. What goes into your salary is so complicated, and so yes, look at the range of like somebody in California or New York City or Boston, right?
Mhm.
And you also have to account for where you live. Like,
Yeah.
those cities have high cost of living. You
Oh
want to
yeah.
think about the size of the company. You need to think about um, your skill set, how many years of experience you have. A lot of factors
Hmm.
actually go into like a salary benchmarking, and it's not it's not entirely a one-to-one comparison when you say somebody in New York City makes $250,000 doing this or $150,000 doing this. So even though I live in a rural town with no stoplights and like 20 people, I deserve 150,000. That's not quite the same.
True, true. And yes, it can take extra effort. And yes, the research will take time and it could be even overwhelming sometimes. Yet it will give you more power during your negotiation.
Exactly. Yeah. And then the other dues, I think just being aware, just talk about, going back to the company also is, does the company already give merit increases annually or cost of living increases? And I think you should take that into account. If they don't give a cost of living increase and they only give a merit increase, let's say they give it a merit increase of 2%, right? And inflation goes up 5%. Yes, you got a 2% raise, but you're actually getting a 3% pay cut because of inflation and the cost of
Exactly.
living going up.
Yeah.
And so that should go into your calculation of what you think your raise should be.
Yeah. And also you can research what is the cost of living increase for your area,
Mm-hmm.
which will also help you have accurate data for your negotiation.
Absolutely.
There's also one additional thing that comes up for me. Let's say there are freezes, there's a limited budget, the company's not doing well financially. Um, it might be helpful also to think what other ways of compensation you would be willing to accept and happy with accepting. Would that be at least additional
Mm-hmm.
time off?
Mm,
Or any other perks, let's say
yeah.
contribution to a gym membership.
Mm,
Uh,
I love that. One company I work for actually, they didn't do this all the time. They only sent it like once or twice, but they sent out a total compensation to every employee. And so they sent your salary plus all the benefits and the value of the benefits. And
Oh,
you got to
yeah.
see like where, like, even though your salary might be, I don't know, like 70 or 50, right?
Yeah.
After you add in all those other benefits, it actually gets up to like 100, 120.
Mm.
Because like, number one, health insurance here is just unnecessarily
Oh, God.
expensive, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
But you have all these other things. And so you're right. You could ask for, maybe they can pay for a degree or a certification or send you somewhere, or you could get extra days off,
Exactly.
right? Those,
Yes.
like,
Yeah.
those other benefits are helpful too.
Yeah. So maybe you cannot get, increase in salary that year because for the company it's really difficult. Let's say
Mm-hmm.
that's the answer. But it could be a counter offer. Could you do at least this? And something that would be meaningful to you.
Yeah.
If you value extra time off, maybe that would be helpful.
Mm, yeah.
So also
Exactly.
you know that you would still be motivated to work there and do
Right.
your work.
Yeah. Anything else in terms of preparation?
I would recommend put it somewhere into a document on paper or in the Word document to
Yep.
keep
Write
yourself
it down.
organized. Write it down.
What are things you can do in the conversation? Number one, you got to approach it as a collaboration. I think you could go in as like a hard negotiation style, and that's not really going to work, especially, most of the time your manager has no direct control
True.
over
Yeah.
like your salary, right? Like they have
Yeah.
to work with HR to figure out, and their VP, or if you're the VP, like other bosses, like there's lots of factors there. Your
Yes.
manager may not be the person that's like directly controlling your salary. So work about it, think about it collaboratively, focus the conversation on the growth of the company and how well the company's doing. And that's where what we said about contributions, what you said about
Yeah.
contributions is big, is
Hmm.
how did your contributions concretely add to the growth of the company or the team or achieving
Yes.
goals or things like that.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, this is maybe part of the don't, a lot of people focus on fairness or what I've done, and you don't get paid for your values. Unfortunately, regardless of how important our values are to us, we don't get paid for our
True.
values
Yeah.
of fairness. We get paid for the contributions that we get paid for the work that we actually do. Right or wrong, that's just how it works. And so the focus should not be on I think it's fair, or I deserve this. So, or I want this. It's really more a collaboration, and how did our work get to that, add to the growth of the company or the team or the bottom line, essentially.
Yeah. It reminds me what sometimes we work on with clients is building a business case for your raise, for
Mm,
your promotion.
yep.
Why this is actually good for the company that you get to that promotion.
Yep.
Your value, you're showing how you're contributing. And so looking at from the perspective of the company needs, of the team's needs, rather than just looking at, oh, this is, I need it, so you should give it to me,
Yeah.
versus like really, as you've mentioned, collaborative approach, looking at what does the company need, what's good for the company also.
Right.
How do I fit? How am I important? How do I bring value to that company, to the team?
Exactly. Yeah. 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 And so that's leading into like what not to do. The first thing is saying, I deserve this, or I think this is fair, or this is unfair if get paid like this, or I want this. Saying those kind of things, we talk about this in typical conversations. You want to create psychological safety. And if you go in guns blazing, you go in demanding stuff, the other person, regardless of whether they're on your side or not, they just immediately feel defensive.
And then it's very difficult to negotiate
Yeah.
in a productive manner.
Yep.
Also, if you come threatening, if I don't get a raise, I'm out of the here.
Ugh. I hear that all the time, and I think, please don't do that. Don't say that. Don't, like, yes, you can think that all you want,
Mm.
and that might be an option to think about afterwards. Like, if they can't
Yes.
accommodate it, if they're never going to accommodate it, yeah,
You
maybe it
also
is
are
time to look at somewhere else.
exactly. Like all of us are also responsible to take care of our needs. So if we really need more money, then we need to take care of ourselves and see how we can get
Yeah.
maybe a different job would be then better.
Yeah. But absolutely, don't threaten. That's just not a good way to have a good, productive, collaborative
No.
conversation.
Yes.
Anything else you would say don't do?
I would say not to come after any preparation without doing any research, skipping the steps,
Mhm.
not thinking about really how you bring the value, sharing the wins, sharing the contributions, not checking the market rate of your
Mhm.
position, or maybe asking, I don't know, in the hallway somewhere without having a proper meeting.
Yeah. Yeah. Just catching them randomly.
Just
That's
like,
not great.
can I just have a quick chat? Anything
Yeah.
else that comes up for you that we are missing?
I haven't seen this as often. I've seen people kind of reference it or joke about it, but don't lie or bluff.
Uh, yeah.
Don't pretend that you have another offer or say like, hey, listen, I got an offer from somewhere else for whatever, 20,000 more, but I'd love to stay here. If you could just do some like half of it, I'd be happy. Don't lie about it. Don't bluff. That's not a good bargaining chip. And again, that's only going to sour the relationship. So
Well,
even if they give it to you, they're just going to be resentful. They're going to always think of you as childish or
mhm.
unreasonable, and so you're just tarnishing your own image in the context of getting that thing you want.
Yeah, so you can have a short-term win, but long term it might hurt you actually.
Right, right. Or they say, all right, well, I'll expect your 2 week 2 week notice then.
Notice.
Bye.
Could be risky too. Yep.
Yeah, when I used to work at and when I left there, I was leaving because I really wanted to work somewhere else. It wasn't because I wanted more money, but they came back like before I left. They said, "Hey, we'll give you a raise of this if you can stay. We really want to keep you." And it wasn't until then that I realized, oh, some people do this on purpose, or some companies will try to keep you like because they want to make sure this happens. And fortunately, like I was like, I desperately, or not desperately, I wanted to like leave and I wanted to go do this other thing. But yeah, I can't imagine what would have happened if I was lying about it, hoping that they would do that for me.
Yeah. I just remembered my own experiences in the past. There was one upsetting experience when we started the conversation between the discrepancy, the women and guys pay. I found out the same guy that was doing less work than me. I was getting paid. I was hired for almost half less, basically, of what they were paying him.
Mm.
Since I had
Mm.
access to the financial, I found out, and I was quite upset. Um, I understand the company, reasoning. They wanted to save money.
Mm.
Um, but at the same time, so I had to have my own difficult conversation there and actually asking for a raise.
Mm. And how'd it
Um,
go?
I did get a raise.
Nice.
Um, I did create that, it was after some time that I proven myself and I put together some presentation.
Oh, very
And
good.
I did get the raise, but also there was a little bit of glass ceiling after, so I felt like I there's no other room for me to grow. It was a very
Yeah.
small business,
Mm.
and so that also had me leave at one point because I just want to also do other things.
Yep. That makes
So it
sense.
wasn't about the money. It was actually me doing wanting to go somewhere else,
Uh,
explore.
so and that happens. And so I think if your options are either they give me a raise or I need to look for another job, I think that's perfectly fine. You just don't need to say that to them.
Yeah, to also watch our energy when we and tone of voice when we are talking in that.
Right. Difficult conversations.
Yep, part of the preparing for that conversation.
Difficult conversations.
Yes.
So I wonder if it'd be helpful for us to role play it, just to demonstrate it, see what it
Yeah.
looks like.
Alrighty. Let's give it a shot.
So for the listeners or the viewers, if you're watching, Lucy, you're my boss. Let's say you're the director of a division, whatever we're in. I'm a manager leading a team of like 4 or 5 people,
Yeah.
and let's do. So what we're gonna do is instead of role playing what not to do, we're just gonna role play what to do. And we'll do it 2 ways. The first way we'll do it where Lucy's on my side, wants to be collaborative, and just see how we can even phrase the conversation. Then we'll do it again where she's pushing back and there's lots of other headwinds or barriers that are in the way. And we can figure out how to overcome those things. Hey, Chris here. I really appreciate you listening to this podcast. And if you are listening to this podcast because you're looking to get better at these difficult conversations, well, if you really want to de escalate difficult behaviors and you want to be assertive without being aggressive and being true to yourself, I have a self paced course that can really help you because I know it's difficult being assertive in lots of different situations. If you're at work and you have to give feedback, if you have to deliver bad news to an employee, or deliver bad news to somebody that you care about in your personal life, or you're struggling to deal with defensive or sensitive people who are pushing your buttons and you don't know how to push back. It doesn't have to be that way. There is a world where you can handle these tough emotions with confidence. You can speak honestly and kindly while you're still being assertive. And you have the ability to manage emotional outbursts and stubbornness calmly, because these are things that I've had to overcome and learn. And so this self-paced course goes through all of those things. I've created this trust framework that helps you think through how to prepare for and how to facilitate hard conversations. And you hear a lot of it actually in this podcast as I talk about how to handle difficult conversations in lots of different scenarios. Currently, the course is closed for enrollment. There's a waiting list. If you are interested in learning more, enrollment will open up at the end of August and the beginning of September. So please go to the website. I'll link it down below and you can learn more about it and join the waiting list if you want to hear more about it. But I'd love to see you there. Hey, Lucy, thanks for meeting today.
Of course, you're welcome.
So I wanted to, if it's okay, I just wanted to talk about the possibility of talking about getting a raise here.
Yeah, you hinted that before, so yes, let's have that conversation. I know you have a small children family. I understand the situation. How
Yeah.
so?
And
Mhm.
I like working here. I love the team you've built. I love the environment, the culture, and I know that the company's been doing really well. I know that we've grown by a lot. We went through that merger last year, and it seemed to go. At least it wasn't affecting me directly, but I know that it was stressful for a lot of people. And you were involved in it, and I know that it went well from what you tell me. Um, and I think it's impressive because we still were able to build our team out. We were able to function well. We were able to continue to meet our revenue goals for the year, and it kind of exceed them over the past year, right? And
That's
so
true. Yeah.
I'd love to just talk about whether there's a possibility of getting a raise.
We are going to be having the conversations with the CEO of the company and, of course, the finance department. So we'll take into consideration, of course, you and the value that you're bringing to the company. We do appreciate you. You've been exceeding with your team the goals, so definitely there will be a discussion about it for sure.
Yeah.
Probably by the end of next month, we will have some information for you.
Okay. I appreciate that. And I wonder, are you also, are there room for talking about the salaries of my team? Because they've been going above and beyond. They've been carrying, a huge workload of like these different projects that we've been kind of overseeing. They've increased their capacity. So we've been, I think from what I understand, I think we're the most tenured team now in the organization. We haven't had a turnover. We've been growing, so I wonder if there's room for them to also think about their increasing their salary as well.
It's a great question, and it shows your leadership. Thank you, as being a caring leader that's not just advocating for your needs, but also for your team's needs. I appreciate that. Thank you. Is there anybody specific that you would recommend? Because you work with them um, closer. So would those be? I believe you have 4 people on the team currently. You've grown from the three. Let's have a separate meeting about those. But yes, and go through the numbers. I have a specific budget, so let's see. Definitely, we can. Your team is a high performing team, and you guys were hitting the targets, and there are no um, issues in a way with you guys. You're all you lead your team very well. So let's see what we can do.
I appreciate that. I know you're still in the middle of conversations. Do you have a sense of kind of what that increase might look like?
I cannot speak to it at the moment because I still need more data from also the finance department.
Okay.
But since our company was doing really well last year, I think I'm pretty positive about that. Do you have some numbers that's in mind for your team? Do you feel?
I think they've all done really well. I don't know if I would put one above the other because they've all just
Mm,
been uh, pulling the lion's share of the work. And
mhm.
even the new guy, Ramon, I think he hit the ground
Mm,
running.
nice.
He had a quick time to productivity. It was incredible. And he picked things up so quick and really contributed and kind of helped advance a lot of the processes that we were doing. So, he's newer, so maybe his increase doesn't necessarily have to be as
True.
much as the other folks, but I still
Yeah,
think he deserves something.
makes sense.
But it'd be great for I'm eyeing like a 10% increase. And I'd love for my folks to get at least 7 or 8.
Got it. I don't know if we can do the 10%, but let's see what the CEO and the finance department come
Okay.
back with, and then we'll go from there. But thank
Okay.
you for sharing.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Lucy.
Alrighty. Thank you, Chris.
Great. Yeah. How did that go from your perspective? I know you were super collaborative, so that made it super easy.
Well, it seemed we had a pretty close relationship, and let's say, I put myself into a position that, yes, I saw the results. I saw that your team was really well performing. And so I was also open because I also want to keep you on the team
Mm,
and I want to
mm,
keep you motivated. Um, I think if we had more context, it would be helpful for me.
mm.
But how was it for you?
Um, I think it was good. It's You made the argument for me a little bit so that I didn't have to fight as much. But I think that's the power of preparation is
Mm,
if it goes if I start coming across more barriers, then yes, I do want to bring out some of those things I researched, like market rate or
yes.
the
Yeah.
other things about the company. Those things will be important if I start seeing those barriers and I need to show evidence and business case of why, right? Like I
True.
could have brought up, a percentage of how we've increased revenue or
Yes.
decreased process expenses or
Yeah.
whatever it is, to demonstrate a tangible value as opposed to it's just fair because we worked hard.
Exactly. Yeah, you reminded me of, quantifiable achievement, accomplishments, not just to put on the resume, but also to bring really to those conversations.
Yeah,
So anything quantifiable that you can
right,
show.
right. So I mean, I think that was also, most people when if you're listening to this, you're like, oh, they'll never go that easily. I don't know. I think there are some managers that are really on board with you, and some supervisors that like really are rooting for you, and you have super supportive folks leading you, and hold on to them as much as possible because there's also plenty of folks who are going to fight you every step of the way for some reason.
Absolutely. So it really depends on the company culture. It depends on your relationship with your manager, on the level of trust
Yeah,
that you have. The deeper the trust, the better the relationship, the easier the conversation can be.
right. So let's actually just see what happens when you throw some wrenches in there. Let's see what happens when
Alrighty.
there's some more roadblocks. And
Let's see, no trust or lower
um,
trust.
hey, Lucy, thanks for meeting with me today.
Hey, Chris, of course. How can I help you today?
I know I hinted at this, and I'd love the opportunity to talk about getting a raise.
Yeah, you've mentioned it before. Chris, this is a very difficult conversation for me because,
Mm,
the company's not doing so. The economy is the way it is right now.
hmm.
And
Yeah,
so
yeah,
we are really trying to keep everybody here in the company. We want everybody, to stay here, to be secured in their jobs. But it also means we have very limited budget for raises.
yeah,
I wish I had different news for you.
yeah. Well, I'm wondering if you're just open to having this conversation.
We can have the conversation. Unfortunately, I cannot promise you anything.
Yeah, yeah. Of course, I know there's no guarantees anywhere. Um, I get it. Like I've worked for you for a while, and yeah, I get it. There's the economy, and then the upcoming election. Everybody's uncertain about what's going to happen in this random weird inflation recession. Um, and also I'd be remiss if I didn't, point out that my team's grown over the past year. We've really reduced a lot of our inefficiencies and processes. We've reduced expenses by 30%, and as far as I can tell, I think just based on what we've talked about before, we have the longest tenure team on here, so we have some stability. We haven't had any turnover, so we haven't had any, we haven't incurred any turnover costs or slowdown in production. So I'm just wondering because I noticed that we're able to contribute, we're able to still help out the organization and contribute, and we're working well together. So looking at the market rates, and considering that they've taken on a lot of work and we've taken on a lot of work, I just want to make sure that everybody's being compensated fairly, both myself and my team. I want to make sure we're all being compensated fairly, so that we can continue to contribute, considering all the stuff we've done.
We are aligned that I want you to be compensated fairly and appropriately for all the work that you've been doing. And at the same time, my hands are tied.
Yeah.
Um, I will definitely deliver your message. Unfortunately, it's not my decision to make. And
Yeah.
the situation is really tough. And as you know, we've lost one key client account.
Mm. Yeah.
And so it may take time to get back ourselves. But you're right, your team did increase the efficiency. We did save some costs there. Um, and at the same time, this is really tough time for us. What about we reopen the conversation in 6 months, where things might
Yeah.
be different? We might have more information, or next year at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about it. And I'm wondering in the meantime if there's any other kind of other ways we can at least um, compensate, maybe not with money, but is there any other things that we can do, in terms of benefits or, time off or things like that that we can explore?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. Since you and your team were doing such an awesome job, I wonder what you think if we could, what would be a way to celebrate you? Would that be taking you at least out for lunch, or uh, giving you something special for your team? That's I could get an approval for that possibly. Or just as additional time off, I could see if I could negotiate that on your behalf.
I appreciate the offer for lunch, and I'm wondering, and I think they would like that. First of all, I think we all like eating. I like the idea of the extra time off. I think they could really use it. We've had a stressful 2 month stretch here, just kind of
Mm.
finishing this couple of projects. I think it'd be helpful to get some additional time off. Um, and also, I wonder, a couple of members of my team are working towards a certification, and I wonder if you're able to pay for that. And I'm also working towards that same certification. So I'm wondering if the company would be willing to kind of pay for us to do that certification.
That's a good point. There could be some educational credit that you can actually have a certain amount used towards your education. Let me get back to you on that. Let me check on the exact numbers. But that seems like a very good option moving forward.
Okay. And how about does the extra days off seem doable also?
I need to check with other people. Unfortunately, I am not the one making the decision, but definitely I'll bring that as options and I'll advocate for you. But I need to have the conversations with HR and the CEO and the finance department.
Okay. Great. So then do you want to check in at our next one-to-one next
Yeah,
week? I don't know when you'll
that
have a
sounds
chance to
good.
talk to those folks.
Possibly let's do it in 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, I hopefully will have some information for you.
Okay, cool. Let's talk then.
Sounds good. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Lucy.
You're welcome.
All right,
So
that was definitely more stressful, but what do you think? How'd that go?
I think some bosses might be even more difficult. I don't know.
I think
But
they will. Yeah.
what I appreciated about you, I didn't feel like you were pressuring me or getting upset. More of understanding. And at the same time, you also brought up, accomplishments of your team and advocating for your team. And you brought up other alternatives, which was really helpful because then I
Yeah.
feel I can still give you something. Let's say I'm the boss that really appreciates the team, that really wants to have great relationships with people and cares about the people to be happy.
Hmm.
So actually, for that type of manager, it's really helpful to have additional options.
Yeah.
So they can also feel they can give you at least something, even then if they cannot give you the money, at least something to do extra.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well done.
I think for me, when my always thought is like when I hear no, I think that's a good thing. I want to hear that no because I want to and I want to explore more. Is it you that's against it or is it you want to do it and you can't do it? And I like to kind of explore more.
Hmm.
And so you're willing to a lot of when I bring up that data, when somebody brings up that data, it's partially you're trying to make it so that you and the manager you're talking to are on the same side. You're trying to get them on your side and face and try to fix the problem together because the problem is low salary or whatever it may
Yes.
be. So how do you get them on your side and work together so that you're both attacking this goal?
You know what also came up for me was at one moment, I was thinking, I need to balance what I share with you about the company not doing so well, because also I don't want to scare you and demotivate you. So then you don't go to the people, oh, the company is not doing well at all. Maybe we should look for another job.
Yeah,
Um, so there's also a fine
yeah,
line, right? Some companies actually say, no, everything is fine. We're just not, they don't really disclose the information as much. Yet
yeah.
there's a lot of gossip going on anyway, and which may actually make the situation worse
Right.
for the people rather than being transparent a little bit. But there's a fine line also, like how much to share.
I I've always erred on the side of as much information as I'm legally allowed to tell you.
Hmm.
Right. And so
Yes.
unless I've been explicitly told don't tell anybody this, or
Yes.
I know it's,
You
illegal to
signed
tell
some.
somebody.
Yes, exactly. You cannot disclose certain information.
Right. Because I think I think managers get into the a fear of like, well, what if they get upset or what if my team starts like
Yes,
getting angry
giving.
about this?
Yep,
That's part of the conversation. That's part of your job as a manager to facilitate
true.
that dialogue and hold your team together. And it's stressful, yeah, because now you're dealing with like big emotions from your team and they might spiral.
Yep.
The problem is they're adults, right?
But
Unless you're working like with teenagers, but if you're
yeah,
overseeing teams of adults, they're adults. They're going to figure out what's going on. They're talking to each other.
true.
Um,
Yes,
even if you say everything's fine, they know what's happening. They can see what's happening. They can sense that things aren't fine. Otherwise, the whole conversation would
absolutely.
be different.
Yeah. And I had, clients wondering how authentic should I be with, I want to be authentic. I want to be transparent. These are my values as a leader. And yet the company prevented them from sharing certain information.
Mm-hmm.
Yet the people were asking and they knew something was going on. So sometimes the leader also is put in a very difficult situation also from like depending on the political area in that company and
Yeah.
the culture.
I appreciate also as a manager, what you did was you said in 6 months, let's revisit this. You didn't say in 6 months we can do the raise. I
Mm.
always I think it's easy for managers to get into that um
Oh,
promising things in the
promising
future.
mode. Yeah.
And you'll never know what's going to
No,
happen in the future. You could be,
exactly.
even if you're doing well financially, things could change. Overall,
Yeah.
I think the only thing I would have changed about what I've done, I think is because that's not my fault. I didn't do well enough is just say a specific number of what I'm looking for.
That's right. Yeah, you
That's the
didn't
only
say
thing
it
I would
because
recommend to people, and that's the only thing I should have done. I just didn't think about the prep in this case. Even the first scenario, I said 10%, but I should have just said I want this.
X amount of increase. And I probably made it also difficult because I said basically no, not right now.
Yeah,
Maybe later, but not right now. But you actually then brought up some specific examples, even though again it might be also helpful, even say, x amount of I don't know, 2000 credit towards education, or 5000, or something, like having a specific number, so it's not
Yeah.
like $100.
Right. Right.
What number would make sense?
Right. Well, we can, yeah, and I think that's a further negotiation. If you
Yes,
come back and
after,
the
exactly.
money that you can give is not what I can get.
Yeah, yeah.
I want to make a fine point for a lot of people who don't work on big level finances is when they see that the company throws a party, right? Um, they throw a party and they're like, instead of throwing this party or instead of giving us pizza, why don't you just give us a raise? That's not how it works in terms of how the money is equal. I think if you've never seen a budget, you don't realize that salaries tend to be like the biggest
The biggest
expense a company
expense.
has.
Yep.
And so if you increase everybody's salary even by 1%, that's a huge now recurring expense. It's not just like a one
Yes.
time,
It's a big
$2,000.
commitment.
That's right. It's a big commitment that you're doing. And so that's why even thinking about like merit increases, like those are a huge deal if you don't have a way to also increase revenue at the same time. And I think that's an important thing for people asking for raises to consider is if you work in a place where you don't have your company stays steady revenue wise and doesn't grow, that's the danger is at some point they can't give you more money.
There'll
Otherwise
be
they
cap.
just will start losing money.
Exactly. Yeah. I like the perspective that you're bringing, basically, in a way, looking at with the empathy also for the other, in this case, the manager or the company, actually, in their financial situation.
Right.
And that's true that it's one of the biggest expenses.
Right. And that's why you should be really considering if you really need to take care of yourself, your family, your bills, whatever. You should really consider, even if you love that place, is this the right choice for you? And that's another hard
Exactly.
decision is,
It
you
is.
might need to go somewhere else because this isn't going to be able to support you and your family and the lifestyle you need to live or you want to live.
Yeah, that's another thing what makes the conversations hard. Sometimes we do want to stay with the company, but the circumstances are sometimes really difficult. The company cannot give uh, more money for the salaries, or they would
Mhm.
go under, or they would need to fire somebody in order to give raise to somebody else,
Yeah.
to get the money somewhere.
Yeah. Exactly.
Um, so these are difficult conversations, difficult decisions to be made too.
Right.
Yet also it's important to have those conversations rather than avoiding them and procrastinating,
Hmm.
which is understandable, because just thinking about it can give us stress. But at the same time, it's more beneficial actually to go for it and at least know where you're
Exactly.
at, so then you can make the wise decisions for your situation, for your life.
What are your big takeaways from everything we've talked about?
That's a great question. I would say one of them, not just how preparation is important and doing that research part and the analytical part and remembering what are the wins, accomplishment, the results, but also the emotional part. So kudos to you in both of the conversations. You were calm. You were open to hearing the other person's perspective. You were not pushy, and so you brought up the collaborative energy into the conversation, which made it easier for me also to be more relaxed and safe and actually tell you the things that
Mhm.
are there,
Yeah.
rather than me defending myself and trying to escape the conversation and close it.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I I also did something I didn't mention earlier is I started the conversation by saying I'd love to talk about the opportunity of getting a raise.
Yes,
I think that's powerful
I love that.
or just in every difficult conversation we ever talk about here is talk about what you want to talk about right away.
Mm-hmm.
Bring it up. Don't try to beat around the bush. Don't like talk about, hey, I'd love to talk to you about my performance. Yes, you do want to talk about your performance, but that's not really what you want to talk about. You want to talk about that raise. Let's just say it, put it out there so that they're not guessing what you're talking about.
I love that. Yes. very well done. You went straight for that focus of the conversation. And what I also liked, you made it even a little bit softer. So you didn't say, I want to talk about getting a raise. You mentioned about the opportunity of getting a raise, which makes it a little bit more open
Mm-hmm.
and less pushy in a way and less demanding.
Yeah.
So well done.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, not lying, not bluffing. I think it's important as like everything we talk about in this podcast is that preparation is so important as you pointed out, is knowing what's gonna happen. And that preparation isn't the be all end all. It's the foundation that helps you be comfortable in that conversation so that when you go in, you still got to be calm. You still got to facilitate it correctly. And having that foundation makes you feel prepared so you can be uh, so you can improvise if need be. So you can take the change in direction if you need to. You can think about, even if I don't get this, what will I be happy to walk away with? Or is it
True.
either I get this raise or I need to go look for another job? And that might be your alternative, but you don't need to say that. You just that's just between
Just
you and
knowing
yeah, just you and
you.
yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Having that kind of where's that line for you.
So yeah,
Very
I'd love
good.
to hear what other people's thoughts are. So
Yeah.
if you're listening, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. Do you have other tips, strategies that work for asking for renegotiating a raise? Do you have other tips on how to do this better than we did it?
Or any other situations when you have a specifically challenging manager that
Mm,
maybe is not rooting for you.
yeah,
And there's some other reason why they don't want to give you the raise
yeah,
that you would love us to role play on.
yeah,
So please let us
exactly.
know.
Yeah.
Collaborate with us.
Yeah, collaborate with us. Well, thanks for listening, everybody. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, send us money, do whatever you need to do, but stay engaged. Let us know what you think so that we can make this podcast better for you.
Thank you. I wanted to say send us lottery tickets because you last time mentioned you wanted to win the lottery. So
Yeah, send us
you can
lottery
send
tickets.
Chris
Yes,
lottery.
I'm happy to get winning lottery tickets all the time. But thanks, everybody. Next week, we'll have
Thanks,
an interview,
everybody.
and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
See you next time.
Welcome to the art and science of difficult conversations. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lucy, and we love having difficult conversations.
That's right. And each week, we'll either share a tip, hear how others have gotten better at difficult conversations, or demonstrate common difficult conversations and what to do and what not to do.
Let's get into it.
In this episode, I want to talk about how do you respond to intense emotional behaviors in a hard conversation, or how do you respond to when people push back against you? They say no, they resist everything you're saying. How do you break through that? And there's actually two main things to think about. Number one, you want to think about how to prevent it. How there's things you can do to even set it up so that you can reduce the likelihood of it. Number two, there are things you can do to address it in the moment. So let's break it down one by one. How can you prevent these kind of things, or at least reduce the likelihood of them happening? First, in the beginning of the conversation, you set the tone by setting ground rules. Set ground rules with the other person so that they can feel safe in the conversation. Talk about what are the limits. Talk about off limit topics. Talk about what's going to happen if somebody raises their voice or gets angry or whatever, how you're going to take a break. Talk about those things now. The sooner you can bring those out into the public, the more safe the other person will feel in the conversation. There's nothing that'll ever magically prevent somebody from ever getting upset at you. All this does is help reduce that. Because remember, when you're going into the conversation, especially if you're the one bringing it up, they're going to feel that fight, flight, or freeze response, just like you're going to feel it, just like I feel it, just like everybody feels it in these hard conversations. So set the tone, set some good ground rules. They go a long way to help someone stay even keeled. Second thing you can do to prevent it is to practice and plan what your emotional regulation skills are going to be. You're going to potentially feel really upset or you're going to feel anxious about this conversation. Think and plan ahead of time. What are you going to do ahead of time in the moment? That doesn't stop it from happening. It just gives you a plan so you feel confident, so you know you're going to be able to respond. Are you going to take a deep breath? Are you going to hold something in your hand to press on so you can put your tension into that? Whatever it may be, do something. Essentially, you're trying to control yourself, because the more you can control yourself, you can set the tone, and you don't have to escalate the situation when the other person starts getting upset or angry or whatever it may be. So now, how do we get into the conversation? How do we respond in the moment? Because things may still happen. First, remember that this is the fight, flight, or freeze response. If they're fighting back, it's that fight, flight, or freeze response. Revert back to your active listening skills. So things like reflection. Just reflect what's going on for the other person. It sounds like you're frustrated. Sounds like you're upset. Sounds like you're angry. That's great. All those things will be fine to say. You don't have to be very specific. You don't have to be super deep. Just commenting on what's happening can make a big difference. And I want to be really clear and honest with you. A lot of people stress about, what if I get the wrong thing? What if I say the wrong emotion? What if I get this wrong? Here's my answer to you. It doesn't matter. For the most part, if you are right most of the time, that's okay. And if you're wrong, that's okay. They're going to tell you what the right answer is. If you say, you're just frustrated, it sounds like you're frustrated about how we're handling the situation. No, I'm not frustrated. I'm just annoyed that we have to keep talking about this. See, that's more information. Then you can talk more about that, explore that. So even if you get it wrong, that's okay. The only caveat is, if you get it wrong all the time, then that's a real problem. If you get it wrong all the time, then they're going to feel like you're not listening. It's going to make them more angry. But for the most part, as long as you stay even keeled, as long as you get it right most of the time, you're going to be okay. Second thing you do is ask questions. Just ask more questions. If they're getting frustrated, if they're getting angry, if they're starting to yell, just comment on it, and then ask a question about what's going on for them. I'm noticing you're getting angrier, you're getting upset. What about this is upsetting you? Ask questions. You're trying to get them out of that emotional state and having them think logically about what's happening. So that's why it's okay to ask questions in these kind of situations, right? If you ask too many, obviously it's all just like everything, it's moderation. If you ask too many questions, it just becomes an interrogation. Asking questions in general, though, can really help you learn more information, and really helps them slow down and think through why they're behaving the way they are behaving, or thinking the things they think. Then you could also think about summaries. That's number 3. Summaries are as they sound. You're just recapping everything that was talked about in the conversation. And I want to help you think through a way to use this intentionally. Most people, when they summarize, they just recap everything that was said. I'm going to encourage you to be thoughtful about the order in which you recap everything that was said. Essentially, what I'm trying to say is, recap everything that they said, try to use their words as much as possible, and then at the end with the thought you want them to start picking up on. So for instance, can I just summarize where we're at? I just want to make sure I get everything right. You're upset that blah, blah, blah happened, and you're upset that we're talking about this, and you're upset that there's no good resolution, and you don't think I'm right. And at the same time, you do want to try to find a way to work together better. See how that at the end, I acknowledge everything that they said, even if I don't agree with it. But at the end, I leave with the last sentence is the last thought I want them to start with. By doing so, you can control the flow of the conversation, and that's why it's really powerful. As long as you say everything else is, as long as everything else you say is accurate, describes what they were saying, you use their words, they'll agree with it. And then the last thought is what they're going to respond to. That's the power of using summary as well. The other things you can do is just take a break. That's the one overlooked skill a lot of people have, is can we just take a break? Can we just take a breather where our emotions are flaring, things are getting heated? Can we just take a step back and come back in a couple of minutes when we're ready to do this? It's okay to ask for a break. It's not a failure. Some people think you need to stay in there as long as possible. You don't have to. You can take a break and come back to it, and you don't have to allow it. You can even talk about that in the ground rules at the beginning. Talk about how if one or both of you feel upset, either of you have the flexibility and the responsibility to ask for a break at that point. Give them some control back in the situation. That way they don't have to feel on the defensive the whole time. And so those are the main things you can do in the middle of the conversation. You don't have to yell back, you don't have to fight back, you don't have to come up with a more airtight argument about why you're right. Just ask good questions, reflect how they're feeling, summarize with intention, and then take a break when you need to. And of course, old standby, make sure you use your own emotional regulation skills. If you listened to the episode last week, Tiffany talked about the importance of mindfulness for her, and that's one of the main things she recommends. I recommend it too. Take a deep breath. That's one of the big skills I use. When somebody in the conversation says something that really upsets me, I will take a deep breath, one long deep breath, and I'll make it visible because I want them to see that I'm thinking about the situation and I'm trying to slow down. It's okay that they see it because I want them to see that I am trying to respond and not react because I care about the quality of the conversation. And you can even bring it up. You know, a lot of making this conversation feel comfortable for the other person is making the invisible stuff visible. So comment on that. Say, I just need to take a minute. I want to respond well with respect. So let me just think about that for a second. That buys you time to think about it. So those are the big things. Prevent it, number one, by even setting ground rules, making sure that you have your emotional regulation skills set up and you're ready to go and you're able to manage your emotions. And then in the moment, remembering that it's basic active listening skills. Ask questions, be curious, summaries, take a break. So those are the big things. Join us next week when Lucy and I jump back into another role play where we talk about conflicts between departments and how you can have a conversation to rebuild that relationship. See you next week.